The fate of your beloved football club rests in the hands of individuals whose decisions could spell its doom. While some owners are known for their shrewd investments and commitment to success, others become infamous for their scandals and controversies. How did one mogul's quest for power lead to a criminal conviction that sent shockwaves through the sport? What made another transform a historical club into a cautionary tale of mismanagement and fan revolt? These owners have caused a lot of drama, from high-profile firings and management disasters to bad money management and outright crime. Join us as we unmask the top 10 most scandalous figures in football. Let's begin with Venky's Group and Blackburn Rovers. The Indian poultry conglomerate Venky's Group bought Blackburn Rovers in 2010, but there were a lot of bad choices after the deal. One of the most controversial moves was the sacking of manager Sam Allardyce in December 2010. Allardyce had been doing a respectable job keeping the club competitive in the Premier League. The fact that Steve Keane, a coach with little experience, was hired to replace Allardyce only made things worse. Keane had a hard time getting things done, and his time in charge was marked by bad play and fan protests. The consequences of Venky's mismanagement soon became apparent. Blackburn Rovers were relegated from the Premier League at the end of the 2011 to 2012 season, and the relegation was a bitter pill for fans to swallow. The club's debts mounted. Despite occasional flashes of promise, Blackburn Rovers have struggled to regain their former status. The club has spent much of the past decade in the lower tiers of English football, far removed from their Premier League glory days. Fans are still upset about Venky's control, and many are still calling for a change in leadership to help the club get back on track. Next, let's talk about Ken Bates and Leeds United. When Ken Bates bought Leeds United in January 2005, the club was deeply in debt. During his time as manager, he worked hard to get the club's finances in order. There were, however, times when these attempts led to decisions that were controversial and more money problems. In 2007, Leeds United went bankrupt, which cost them 10 points and sent them back to League One, the third level of English football, for the first time in their history. The administration method itself caused a lot of trouble. Bates set up a tricky and controversial buyback deal that let him keep running the club even though it was heavily criticized and looked over. A lot of fans and onlookers thought the process wasn't open and accountable, which made people even more unhappy. Bates eventually sold Leeds United to GFH Capital, a financial bank based in Dubai, in 2012. Up next too, Vincent Tan and Cardiff City. Vincent Tan, a Malaysian businessman, joined Cardiff City in 2010. The club had a long history but was having trouble making a big mark in the top levels of English football. Then, Tan's crazy idea for Cardiff City would set off a storm. He was brave enough to change the club's traditional blue uniform to red in 2012, thinking that red was a luckier and more marketable color in Asia. However, this was an outright insult to people who had supported them for a long time. The Bluebirds, as they were affectionately called, had worn blue since 1899 when the club was first formed. The switch to red felt like a betrayal of their heritage. His unconventional management style also raised eyebrows and drew criticism. One notable incident was the sacking of popular manager Malcolm Mackay in 2013, just a few months after leading Cardiff to progress to the Premier League. Many people were upset about the choice because Mackay was a fan favorite and a big part of the club's recent success. Fans were getting more and more angry because they thought Tan was meddling in team selection and tactics. In the end, the club had a hard time competing at the top level, and at the end of the season, they were in danger of being relegated. People thought that the changing management and Tan's controversial choices helped bring about their downfall. Vincent Tan gave in to fan pressure in the end and reverted back to the old blue kit. Even though the scars of past fights were still there, it was a moment of peace. And now we have Thaksin Shinawatra and Manchester City. Thaksin Shinawatra, the controversial former Prime Minister of Thailand, was in charge of Manchester City before Sheikh Mansour took over and changed things. When Thaksin first arrived, people were hopeful. He put money into the team and got famous players like Elano, Martin Petrov, and Vedran Korluka. He also chose Sven-Goran Eriksson, who used to coach England, to lead the team. City showed early signs of promise, with glimpses of their ability and a newfound drive. Fans dared enough to hope for a better future. However, Thaksin's past soon caught up with him. In 2008, a Thai court found him guilty of corruption and sentenced him to 2 years in prison. The charges related to a real estate deal during his time as Prime Minister, and the conviction was part of a broader political struggle in Thailand. An international arrest warrant was issued, forcing Thaksin into exile. This scandal severely undermined his position as owner of Manchester City, and the stability of the club was thrown into question. He eventually sold the club. Next on our list is Mike Ashley and Newcastle United. In 2007, the same year that Thaksin Shinawatra bought Manchester City, Mike Ashley, the British businessman who owns Sports Direct, paid £134 million to buy Newcastle United. Famous managers like Kevin Keegan, who was revered by fans, had disagreements with Ashley and his management team. Keegan quit in 2008 because he didn't agree with the trade policies. This led to large protests and showed how the owner and the fans were becoming more distant from each other. Under Ashley's ownership, Newcastle United experienced the ignominy of relegation twice in 2009 and 2016. Each relegation was a bitter blow for the fans, who blamed Ashley for not investing adequately in the squad and failing to provide the stability and leadership needed to compete in the Premier League. Protests against Ashley became a regular feature at St. James Park, with fans demanding he sell the club and voicing their discontent over what they saw as his carelessness and poor management. In the end, a group led by Saudi Arabia bought the club in October 2021, ending Ashley's 14-year run. Not forget Flavio Briatore and Bernie Ecclestone, Queen's Park Rangers. In 2007, Queen's Park Rangers, a club with a storied past but languishing in the lower tiers of English football, found itself under new ownership. Flavio Briatore, an Italian businessman with a flair for the dramatic, and Bernie Ecclestone, the powerful F1 Supremo, to control. The two promised to bring their high-octane energy from the racetrack to the football field and turn the club's luck around. However, Briatore and Ecclestone's leadership was anything but normal from the start. During their time in office, there was a lot of financial trouble and a lot of bold, sometimes confusing choices. Even though they were rich, they kept messing up their money. The club's debts grew, and people started to wonder if their way of doing things could last. During their ownership from 2007 to 2011, QPR hired a total of 11 managers, making it seem like the manager's job was always open. The steady turnover made it almost impossible for managers to set long-term goals or put together a team that worked well together. Malaysian billionaire Tony Fernandes bought a controlling stake in the club in 2011, and this put an end to the troubled rule of Briatore and Ecclestone. Let's talk about Sheikh Mansour and Manchester City. For a long time, Manchester City lived in the shade of its more famous neighbor, Manchester United. But things changed quickly on the blue side of Manchester in 2008 when Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, a member of the royal family of Abu Dhabi, bought the club. Getting so many star players and great coaches at once was like putting together a superhero team. Some of the players like Sergio Aguero, Yaya Toure, and Kevin De Bruyne became famous and helped the team win many Premier League titles and domestic cups. UEFA shocked the football world in February 2020 when they announced a 2-year ban on Manchester City from European competitions, along with a hefty £30 million fine. The judge said that City had lied about how much money they made from sponsorships from 2012 to 2016. For a club of City's stature, this was nothing short of a disaster. Sheikh Mansour and Manchester City were not going to let this go, though. They got ready for court, taking the decision to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The CAS decision came out in July 2020, and the 2-year ban was thrown out. The court cited insufficient evidence to support UEFA's conclusions, though it did uphold a reduced fine of £10 million for obstructing the investigation. Not surprisingly, Silvio Berlusconi and AC Milan. AC Milan had a lot of success during Silvio Berlusconi's 31-year ownership. The club won 5 of its 7 European Cups and Champions Leagues during his time in charge, but Berlusconi's reputation is tainted by a lot of legal problems and scandals. He was seen as a tax-dodging jerk who used his huge media empire to help his political career and look out for his business interests. He was in court for a lot of his life because of his famous bunga bunga parties with girls and teenage escorts. During his time in office, Berlusconi had many legal problems, and investigators often went after him. Even though he was found guilty of multiple crimes in court and had to do community service after being found guilty of tax fraud in 2013, Berlusconi never went to jail and was able to overturn his convictions for fraud and corruption. Berlusconi's reputation was hurt even more by his friendships with unpopular leaders like Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. Up next is Massimo Cellino, the manager-eater. Massimo Cellino started managing football teams when he bought Cagliari in 1992 when they were in Serie A. Over the next 21 years, he fired 35 managers, making him famous for being very ruthless. Cellino's controversial reign at Cagliari saw its first major legal hiccup in 1996. He was handed a suspended 14-month sentence after being convicted of deceiving the European Union and the Italian Ministry of Agriculture out of £7.5 million. This was just the beginning of his run-ins with the law. In 2001, Cellino faced a 15-month suspended sentence for false accounting at Cagliari. In 2013, Cellino's problems got worse when he was arrested as part of an investigation into how public money was wrongly used to pay for part of Cagliari's stadium. In February 2014, Leeds United said that Cellino had agreed to buy out 75% of the club, but only if the Football League gave his approval. He was still having trouble with the law though. A court in Sardinia found Cellino guilty in March 2014 of illegally evading import duty on his yacht Neely. He had to pay a £500,000 fine. In June 2014, Cellino decided to sell Cagliari to the Italian company Florset for an undisclosed amount of money. This was the end of his troubled time with the Serie A club. Cellino's time at Leeds from 2014 to 2017 was marked by problems and protests from fans. It was a very rough time in the club's history. And finally, the most scandalous figure, Roman Abramovich and Chelsea. When Roman Abramovich sold Chelsea FC in June 2022, it was the end of an era in English football. Few people could have imagined the huge changes Abramovich would make when he bought Chelsea for £140 million in 2003. He spent more than £2 billion in new players and another £90 million in new managers over the next 20 years. This aggressive method broke out the usual pattern of stability in football management and set a new standard for who owns a football club. Abramovich's rise to fame was not, however, without scandal. He got rich by getting income and selling assets that he bought from the former Soviet Union that had been privatized. In 2011, Boris Berezovsky, another oligarch, sued Abramovich for €5 billion, saying that he had stolen money from their business partnership, Sibneft. Even though Abramovich won, the hearing showed that Sibneft's auctioning process was rigged. The relationship between Abramovich and the Russian government, particularly President Vladimir Putin, has long been a point of contention. Even though there were long-running claims of special treatment in business deals that helped the Russian government, these ties didn't have major effects until Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. The UK government, along with the European Union, sanctioned Abramovich, forcing him to sell Chelsea. Clearly, the owners of football clubs have a lot of power over how well they do. Check out my other videos to see more scandals in the world of football. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more videos. See you in the next one.